welcome to the very first episode of Indians in Chicago, a podcast where we will be celebrating the incredible stories, achievements, and cultural impact of Indians who are making a mark in your very own Windy City. And what better way to begin this journey than with an icon? Someone whose name is synonymous with grace, artistry, and rich traditions of Indian classical dance. Our guest today is none other than Srimati Hema Rajagopalan, a globally acclaimed Bharatanatyam dancer, choreographer, and the founder of Natya Dance Theatre, one of the most respected Indian dance institutions in the USA. From performing on some of the world's biggest stages to mentoring generations of students, Hema ji has dedicated her life to preserving and evolving Bharatanatyam while making it accessible to audiences far beyond India. She has not only won many prestigious awards, but has also played a vital role in bringing Indian dance into the cultural fabric of America. Today, we'll talk about her journey from India to Chicago, the challenges and the triumphs of keeping a centuries-old art form alive in the modern-day world, and how she continues to inspire young artists and fellow Indians to embrace their heritage. Hema ji, it is an absolute honor to have you as our very first guest of Indians in Chicago. Hi Hema ji, this is Ashutosh Sharma. Namaskar. कैसे हैं आप?
बहुत मज़े में हूँ.
आपसे कुछ सवाल जवाब होंगे और आपकी जर्नी के बारे में जानेंगे. इंडिया से आप यहाँ पर आए और यहाँ पे अपने आप के लिए नाम जो बनाया है और शिकागो में जो आपके बारे में लोग जानते हैं उसके बारे में हम आपसे कुछ क्वेश्चंस पूछेंगे. So I hope you're ready.
I'm ready.
So one of my first questions to you is chai or coffee?
Coffee.
And you were telling me you evolved to coffee, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, but you were originally a chai person.
Yeah.
So when you were a chai person, was it green tea or black tea?
I think it was black tea.
All right. And now you are a coffee person.
Yes.
Okay. So which year did you migrate from India in?
75.
1975. It's been a long time.
Oh, a long time.
And what made you take the big step of moving here to US?
It wasn't me actually, but it was because of me that my husband, he had a green card at that time when we were married. And we got married in 68. And then we were based in Delhi. He was based in Delhi. I was also going to college in Delhi. But I was also a performer of Bharatanatyam. So I was an upcoming young dancer in the city. So I used to perform a lot. But soon found out that there was a lot of bureaucracy involved in getting to places or being presented by, organizations in Delhi. So then that brought me to the realization that I want to be not doing that. I didn't want to market myself. So my husband, since he had a green card, and he suggested that he would go to the United States and on a study leave. He was in the government, in the Indian Railways, in the Northern Railways. So he said, just for a couple of years, let's go out and have a breath of fresh air. And I wanted to probably leave dance, and just explore the world around for some time and then get back and then decide what to do.
And then you came here, but you got
Then
settled.
I came here, yes.
All right. Talking about Bharatanatyam and your introduction to the art, when was it in your life? How early was it in your life that you were introduced to Bharatanatyam, and what motivated you towards this art form?
I was very young, so it wasn't me who started the idea of having classes, but it was in 1956 when I was 6 years old. So my mother had learned the art form, and in those days, they were not allowed to perform on the stages. So she had learned the dance, but never really performed. So when she thought, when I have a daughter, I'm going to make her learn the art form. And so she would take me to some dance performances that were there, that happened in the cities, where she was in Chennai at that time. And So she found me dancing along the aisles. So she thought it's a good time to start. And that's how I started when I was 6 years old.
Okay. And who did you learn from?
I learned from one of the Devadasis, actually. The term Devadasi is a terminology that's for another podcast.
Okay.
These were the heritage dancers who were traditionally heritage dancers, and they were married to God, so on, and they,
Yes.
you know about that. So she was one of the Devadasis, one of the last Devadasis. She's a cousin of Bala Saraswati, who was at that time internationally famous Devadasi who used to dance, one of the few that danced. So she had just started a school where my grandparents were living. And so I started learning from her for just about 6 months when my parents were going to move to Delhi.
Okay.
So when that happened, she thought that I was really brilliant, and she presented me in a performance which was about 2.5 hours long, which is called an Arangetram, which is like a debut performance.
Yes.
And she thought she should do this, she should present me, and this was done in Chennai in front of a big, huge audience. And so that's then I moved to Delhi and learned from Dandai the Pani Pillai, who's a very famous
Yes, Padma Shri.
Bharatanatyam teacher in Chennai, who had
Yes.
his brother in Delhi, and that's how I started with him learning
Oh, very nice. How was your Arangetram?
Arangetram. I don't really remember a lot, but I have newspaper reviews which say that I was a prodigy and that this is from, the previous birth kind of a feeling that they had, and so on and so forth. So it must have, because it was really remarkable. I, as a teacher, cannot believe that in 6 months I could do an entire repertoire, which is called Amargam. And from the newspaper reviews, it looked very promising that I was a promising dancer.
Nice. So good to know
Yeah.
about your journey and how it was when it started for you. Bringing this art form to the US and training it to students through your theater, Natya. How has that journey been for you?
I would say that it was a very organic thing that happened, situation that happened. So when I came in 75, in the early part of 75, there were hardly that many Indians in Chicago. And the very few people that we we knew, maybe a handful, maybe under 10 families that we knew, I found that they were all wanting to melt into the melting pot, so to say. It was a very American thing.
Right.
That we should not be keeping our Indian heritage, Indian identity. We need to melt into the melting pot so
Right.
that we are able to assimilate into their culture. So this was something which was very, very much, it was really bothering me a lot when people talked about this. And it so happened that there was one, and I was at that time, I used to I used to practice dance, but I never performed for those first 6 months or whatever. So I was actually a dietitian at Loyola Hospital at that time because I thought, let me do something else. And I had a master's in nutrition, so I was working as a dietitian. But looking at what is happening around me, I thought, no, I think Indians are losing their identity. They are not recognizing their own rich cultural heritage, which is a very valuable thing. And so at that time, there was one friend who really felt that I should dance, just so that people have an awareness of what this Bharatanatyam is. And he was a South Indian by name, Dr. Rajan. So he organized a performance in a very small community hall. So I had my music with me on tape, professionally taped. So I performed. It was that year, at that point, that there were a couple of families there in the audience that really felt drawn to it and said, please teach our, daughters. And they were like 5 or 6 year old kids. And I had never taught before. So I thought maybe this would be one way of me educating them, or bringing awareness of our rich cultural background and heritage and literature and poetry and whatnot, our mythology and philosophy. So I thought maybe I should teach, but I had no idea because I'd never taught before. So I called my Guruji in Chennai, Dandayadapani Pillai, and he said, no, go ahead and teach, it'll just come.
Okay.
And that's how it started, in a one-bedroomed apartment that we were living. So literally I sat on the bed and there were just this much of space and I started teaching.
Talking about Guru Shishya Parampara, which is a very integral part of the art form, and relating it to the modern times where, it is very important to stay relevant on social media. You cannot always reach out to your guru and take permission. How has that evolved, and does it impact the art form? How do you see it in the modern times? Is it evolving? Would you consider this evolution, or would you consider this not being correct?
I would consider this not being correct.
Okay.
Because I think, and I have heard other artists commenting on this, that you must stick to one guru. It's very important. You can get inspired by other gurus and you can learn from other gurus, if your guru permits and if you think. Because when you are steeped in that guru parampara relationship, that dhaga, that thread that goes, that has a different impact on the Sishya. Definitely. And now with all the social media and what is happening, you can hardly find this Guru Sishya Parampara being kept by a whole lot of people. Because, it's very easy to move from one to the other. They see other teachers or other styles and they want to learn that. They go from here to there and they learn bits and pieces of, so it becomes a mishmash sometimes. I'm not saying always, but I'm not generalizing. Right. But I think that's what happens.
What do we do at Natya to make sure that this is deeply enrooted in the students when we teach them?
I think I don't really draw any parameters in a way, but the way I teach and the way I impart the education, I think my students still follow what I teach and imbibe, and very rarely do I find anyone that moves away and does things with other teachers and so on. There have been situations, but then you can't enforce. As a guru, I don't think I should be enforcing. It should come on a very organic level.
Any favorite Arangetram you remember?
They're all my favorite Arangetrams. Each one is a flower that I feel has blossomed in my garden.
Okay. Yes, so, and it's difficult choosing from your own children.
Very difficult, because they each, surprise me on the stage, and they're really beautiful.
Okay. So talking about when you started Natya, what were the initial few challenges that you faced bringing this, Bharatanatyam is rooted in tradition, and when you bring that art form to a different country that has not been introduced to it, what are some of the challenges that you faced and how did you overcome them?
So there are a lot of challenges. I think if you look at my early times, I would want to tell you that very, very early, like probably late 70s, when I still remember when I was teaching one of the students. She was a North Indian parent who had no exposure to Bharatanatyam. And so one day she was very frustrated and said, "Aap to bas ek 1-2 karti rehte hain, there is nothing else in this. There's no music. You're not really teaching any dance. It's just, movements that are going on. I'm going to check with another teacher." There was I don't know whether your audiences would remember, there was a famous movie star by name Padmini, who has acted in a lot of Hindi movies as well with Raj Kapoor and so on and so forth. And she was a Bharatanatyam dancer as well. and she had learned, and she was older than me, and she had a school in New York
Okay.
or New Jersey. So she said, I'm going to call Padmini and find out whether what you're doing is right, So I said, I immediately told her, I said, every parent, every teacher has a style of her own. If you're going to find out all these things, I'm not the right teacher for you. So right away I said, so these are kind of challenging because they are challenged also because they also want to know what their trajectory is.
Right.
They have no clue what it takes. They have never seen classical dance being, taught. And so that's a challenge, right, for them, for me. It's a challenge to communicate. And most of the parents don't have the background of our philosophy, of our culture even. So to teach them even, so many of them don't even know who Rama is or who Shiva is or Krishna is. So my classes have to become more than just dance class. Teaching them our, value systems, Sanatana Dharma, and our epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata. So bringing all those narratives to them and, so I had to myself learn as well. I was
Right.
also young at that time, right? So I would have to go back to my texts. And so I developed a big, huge library. And I had never read the Natya Shastra, for example. I had never read the theory of Bharatanatyam. So I had to go back to the roots. And then, so you literally have to spoon feed them and to notate. How do you notate? Make stick figures and show them how to memorize.
Right.
Because they only come once a week. Because traditionally in India, you go to the dance class at least 3 or 4 times a week.
Right.
And here, because of the distances, they came only once a week. So it's hard for them to relate and to be consistent with what is required. And since they are managing 2 worlds.
Right.
One is an Indian world at home and then a totally different Western world outside.
Right.
Right? So how do you balance it and how do you do that? How do they feel proud of who they are?
Right.
In the school, for example, which is typically a white school, for example. And here we are trying to be Indian and, this is Indian culture. So it's alien to them, right? So to educate, it becomes really a huge task for us to give them that background.
Well, that's a good insight for me. I'm a new parent and I have a 3-year-old boy, Aishwin.
Yes.
And it's a good insight that us as Indians who've migrated to US should teach our children at least the basic epics and should have build some roots to the mythology and make them aware. I try. I have some books, but I think he's now reached an age where he can understand. So 3 onwards, do you think 3 onwards is a good age to teach, or what would be?
Oh, yes. I have some primies who are in a primary class there's one girl who has just come. She's 3 years old, actually.
Oh, okay.
In the Schaumburg studio. Yeah, a little girl. Yeah,
Okay.
But 4 or 5, better.
The lifestyle changes you had to adopt to being an Indian.
I don't think I had to really adapt to any lifestyle changes. I'm a vegetarian. I cook our Indian meals. And so me and my husband, we were both very instrumental, I would say, in bringing Indian art,
Right.
South Indian art, North Indian art to Chicago, so that people it was not just open to just the Indians, but, we tried to promote it and share it with the other diverse audiences as well. So we were very, very involved in the community groups. And in fact, the temples really began in our home because the students used to congregate in our homes and the parents felt they should talk to each other and, this is something important for them, talking about Rama, Krishna, knowing about them, what about a temple and so on. And that's how it started. So I want to say that it's very important that we don't, I wouldn't say we have to wear a coat when it's winters, right?
Right.
We have to adapt to that.
Right.
But I have to say, for a very long time, I never had a pair of shoes.
Okay.
And people used to laugh at me because I always wore a kolhapuri chappal. It was very favorite for me. So I used to wear a socks and wear kolhapuri chappal and go in the snow. It was funny. People really thought that I was crazy. But yes, you have to adapt to climatic changes and environmental changes and how you kind of relate to them. I used to teach in the Chicago public schools in the South Side. And that was in the early 80s, I would say, and very, very surprised to find that I would go, the first time when I went into the classroom, the kids, it was a high school, the kids were sitting with their feet, some of them, feet up on the desk when I entered. So I thought, what is this? Don't they respect the teacher?
Yeah.
The teacher comes in our schools in India, when the teacher comes in, everyone stands
Right.
up, right? So here it's a different kind of a culture where they take it very friendly.
Yeah.
They are very, very different. Right?
I think I've experienced this. That respect here.
It's different.
My wife is a teacher, so I get to experience how respect for elders, respect for teachers isn't inbuilt.
No, it's not.
So it has to be really earned, and then too, even after people do really so much to earn it, they don't often get it,
Yes.
because respect is definitely scarce, at least
Yes,
here in US.
yes. And so that was an eye-opener for me. And then I went out and talked to the class teacher and I said, how do I get these tea? And they were eating in front of me. They were biting into the sandwich and while I was standing there. So I didn't know whether I should start the class. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
I went out and I talked to the teacher and she said, no, you have to introduce yourself and just say, and you have to get your class in order. So I said, okay. So these are challenges. These are learning
Right.
experiences.
Giving a message to parents who are interested in enrolling their children for Bharatanatyam. One, I clearly understood that this is not to be taken as a co-curricular activity. This is a serious dance form, and people should give it more weightage than just something that their children are doing other than studies. Other than that, what are the messages that you would like to give to parents who are interested in enrolling their students?
I
their
am
children?
a big proponent of Bharatanatyam, of course, but it's not because I specialize in Bharatanatyam or perform and teach Bharatanatyam. But I think that Bharatanatyam as an art form is such a composite art form. It's a complex composite art form where you have to express everything, right? Even if you learn Hindustani or Carnatic music, for example, you don't get to express, you don't lose your, identity in your expression. Whereas Bharatanatyam is a total yoga where you can really, really transcend. And I feel that is a very spiritual education that's very necessary, even if the student is not hoping to be a dancer.
Right.
Even then, I think parents should treat Bharatanatyam or any other classical art, in my opinion, but Bharatanatyam, yes, because I'm specializing in that. I would say that you should treat it as a very important aspect of the child's education.
Right.
As much as math, science, or whatever it is, more than teaching the child guitar and piano and so on and so forth, because it is our culture. Because you can learn piano because then it's an art form.
Right.
But it's not our culture. It's not our spirituality doesn't come into play. Whereas in Bharatanatyam, you are on that spiritual track,
Right.
which is very important. So I would say that you should go to the right teacher and just not go to somebody who's close to your house, because it's another thing. If you find the right teacher, I think you should travel and go however far you have to go.
Now, I do understand that in India, you could attend classes like 2 or 3 times in a week, and here, the frequency is less. Still, if a parent is enrolling their child for Bharatanatyam from Natya or to learn from you, how much time commitment overall would be from, say, day 0 to Arangetram, if you were to give me an average time duration?
We have this in our handbook, so I can relate to that and tell you about it. Ideally, it would be best, even when the child starts at 5 or 6 years old, that they practice at least 2-3 times a week at home, starting at 30 minutes and then going on to 1 hour, whenever they have time. Then when they go into their high school, they won't have that kind of time to practice, but definitely at least a couple times during the week. I insist that the parents, the mother or the father, whoever is consistently coming to the dance class, be there in person and videotape every session. So I allow that. I want the parents to be in the class. Traditionally, the parents are not allowed in the class anywhere.
Right.
But in Natya classes, I insist that the parents sit in the class because they come only once a week, right? So they must be equipped with whatever I'm teaching. So then that is important if they are really going further, right? So I think, it's how much you practice and how much you keep and how much you go forward. And then after doing the Arangetram, how much interest, you have in continuing to perform, continuing to learn, because it's a big, vast ocean. Like I have students who've been learning for 25 years, still coming to the class.
So my question is, if day 0 to Arangetram, an average duration, if you were to say.
Day 0 to, I usually don't do an Arangetram unless you're 16 years old.
Okay.
So if you're talking about a 10-year span,
Okay.
I think you have to practice at least 3-4 hours in a week.
And what are few things that you learn from your guru, Padma Shri Pillai, that you kind of make sure that you pass on to the next generation of students?
Very important and a very good question, because he was such a big stickler for making sure that artistic excellence is maintained. So integrity is maintained. So you would not move forward unless a student really has all those parameters in place, right? So he was very, very good in making sure that the artistic technique is very important. And that is, I keep to that, and also to maintain how you move on the stage and with how much bhav, how much of internalization you do. The other guru I had, who was my big inspiration, is Kalanidhi Narayanan. She's Padma Bhushan Kalanidhi Narayanan, who was an expert in Abhinaya, on the expressional aspect, which is a very important aspect of Bharatanatyam. So I learned from her for a while also, and I was one of her prime disciples. And in her teaching of how this art form, how you express all the different emotions, is a very important aspect. And so learning that technique I have imbibed from her, and I pass it on to my students. And I feel that is a very important aspect that students realize, definitely, that they have to be doing it and understanding the literature, internalizing and expressing the emotions. So
you also briefly touched on the topic that this is a spiritual connection.
Yes.
And generally a spiritual connection between guru and shishya as well.
I'm not sure.
That is not true?
I don't know. I don't know whether there's a spiritual connection between the guru and the shishya. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But spiritual connection in the sense, a connection where, because most of the content of our material is such, our poetry, and you would probably, even from our Gita, the Bhagavad Gita also says that, right? So Vasudeva Kutumbakam is a famous thing. So, and that's the philosophy that is entailed in all the poetry and all the emotions and all the narratives that, we go through. And realizing that we are all equal. Today we talk about equity and we fight, and today's world is totally chaotic. isn't it?
Right.
So it's a totally selfless feeling. So when you come into I tell my students, when you come into the dance studio, you leave your shoes out, which means you leave your identity out.
Right.
And you become that character or the thing that you're playing on the floor. And that is a transcendental experience.
Right.
Right? So the more and more they delve into the poetry, the more and more they act, they have to be that. So when you keep on doing that, they lose their own
Ego.
self. Yes,
Yeah.
right.
So disconnect
That's what
from
I
the
call by
self.
spirituality.
Understood.
That takes many, many years. They won't get that until they are 15, 16 years old.
Right.
So when they're very young, they're just doing it mechanically. But when they are into it, they realize what it is, and that's a different feeling altogether.
So disconnection from self is
yes,
where
disconnection from the self.
you explore the spiritual side of
Exactly.
Bharatanatyam.
And then you realize, then of course there are roadblocks, and then of course there are, it's very blatant to you when you make a mistake and you say, why am I feeling like that? Why am I being... Then they realize themselves, right? But then we're not all, the evolution takes different stages.
Right. So does one have to practice some other techniques like meditation or yoga as
That's
well?
a good thing. I mean, that's a very added thing. Yeah.
Because those things also
Yeah.
kind of promise disconnection from self.
Exactly.
So
but
would you
dance
recommend...
itself is a meditation.
Right.
Because the minute you start doing even your basic steps, if they are doing, basic movement, even the pure abstract dance itself is very, very meditative. And the music, and also if you get into it, you automatically lose the surrounding. And that's normal.
Tell us what's there new for Natya? What are your plans for Natya in future? How do you see Natya evolving in 2025 and beyond?
Well, I'm at a stage where I'm at crossroads of rethinking and wondering, because these are questions, but this is our 50th year, and hopefully we are planning some good events to celebrate the 50 years of Natya. And I just feel that, unfortunate, I would say, yeah, because Indian community has come to America to better themselves and
Right.
in that way, right? So it's very difficult for me to find students or children who would take dance as a career, So that's the unfortunate thing that I feel, that's not there. Like I meet so many other of my counterparts who are doing other, not Indian, but non-Indian, where there are musicians and dancers who love dance, and that's all they do. They would wait on tables, but then they still want to dance. Whereas our Indian children won't do that, So they're not full-time dancers. So yeah, somewhere I want to develop a program where I probably can get a good set of dancers that are only dancing and that are full-time dancers. So hopefully something good will happen.
All right. I'm going to now start with the rapid fire round. And how rapid fire round goes is generally you have to be as short as possible and as quick as possible. So generally one word answers or like really short answers.
Okay.
So my questions are Chicago deep dish pizza or Mumbai vada pav?
Mumbai vada pav, of course.
Okay. If you could perform at any location in the world, where would that be?
In the temple.
Okay. One Bollywood song you'd love to see in Bharatanatyam form?
There are several.
Just tell us one.
Can't think. Can't think straight. Yes. What was that? The Slumdog Millionaire we did. Jai Ho.
Jai Ho. Okay. All right. Describe Bharatanatyam in one word.
A straight connection to God.
Perfect. One thing about Indian culture that Americans should definitely try.
Bharatanatyam.
Okay, that's great. You've been awesome, and this was Indians in Chicago, and with our first guest, Hema Rajagopalan ji, and we're so thankful for you to be here. Such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Ashutosh.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All the best.
Thank you.